This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy.com, Netflix.com, and eMusic.
Hey, I'm Josh, and welcome to iFanboy, the comic book discussion show from the website iFanboy.com. That's not Connor or Ron. This is our cartoonist Alex Robinson.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, how you doing? Do you call yourself a cartoonist? Is that the title that you use?
Cartoonist American. I generally will do. I'll call myself a cartoonist. I don't really have any issue with it.
So you're not a graphic novelist?
No, that just sounds like I'm really trying to be like smart or something. But yeah, comic book artist seems too dorky, and graphic novel seems too pretentious. So cartoonist is right there in the middle. So.
Fair enough. It's not a cartoonist pride thing like you.
No, yeah, I guess it's good enough for Charles Schultz. It's good enough for me.
That'll work.
That's.
So let me ask you. You're a professional. You do this as a living. How do you get from the point where you decide you want to do cartoons or your comic books or whatever to where this is your day job? This is your thing.
Well, I graduated from art school and I had a full-time job. I was working at a Barnes & Noble.
Wait a minute, just like one of your characters.
Exactly.
We'll
yes.
get to that.
Okay. Yeah,
so did you major in art or cartooning? Or?
I majored in cartooning. A lot of the people I know who also wanted to be cartoonists would sort of hedge their bets and major in illustration, and I was always like, no, I'm a purist, keep it real, and
you don't want anything to fall back on.
No, it's just, so this is it's this or starve, and I could use a little starving, but what the heck? So, so I graduated from art school, and I was determined to get published, and I was doing four 20-page mini comics a year, and sending them out to publishers, and eventually one of them bit, and gradually I climbed the savage ladder.
And was Box Office Poison the first thing you did, or?
I did some other ideas fresh out of college, but none of them really have seen much of a wide audience, thankfully, because they were terrible. So, Box Office Poison was the first thing I really, serious thing.
And the mini comics, did you self-publish those and distribute them, or?
Yeah, the mini comics, I would just go to the copy shop and, bring them to stores, sell them at shows, give them to publishers, anything I could do to get it out.
Now, is that the stuff that ended up being part of the later trade paperback, or did you redo some of that story? Or?
No, I kept it all in there. When we did the big collection, there was some question about, well, do I go back and redraw some of the earlier pages, which to me seem like I can't even look at them because they seem so crude, but it seems like, where would you stop? You'd be like swallowing your own tail. Well, I'll just redraw these first 20 pages, but then 21.
So the book is all inclusive of everything.
Yeah, the book has everything in it. You can see my process. You can see me evolve as a cartoonist from, terrible to pretty okay.
So at what point were you able to quit your day job and draw full time?
It was probably about halfway through, and I don't want to give people the wrong impression that I'm living the high life drawing comic books. I mean, some of it comes from the comics. My wife also, works, and she's very supportive. So that's, definitely a big factor. So if you want to make it in the arts, find a very supportive spouse. That's what I'm saying.
It's true. I mean, it must be such a scary prospect to go from having a job one day that somebody's sending you a check, and then.
Right.
And then you're like, I'm on my own. And this was when you were still doing through Antarctic?
Oh yeah, this is back when the Antarctic Press series was going on. It was quarterly / bi-monthly, and my wife and I, well, she was my girlfriend at the time, realized that if I wanted to stick to any kind of schedule, I couldn't keep the day job, so we sort of an investment. She was like, okay, well, we'll give this a shot and see how it goes. And, thankfully it paid off. So.
And she reminds you of it every day.
Every
damn day.
So,
anyway,
to answer your question, it wasn't really scary. It was delightful because it was, a dream come true.
That's cool.
So, thankfully it worked out. But, I was never so happy as the day I quit that bookstore.
I know the feeling. Let me ask you, we've talked to other guys. Rick Remender specifically told us one time that as a freelancer, you're constantly, you have the fear behind you. The fear of well, this is working so far, but what happened? I mean, like, you've been at this for a while now.
Yeah.
Is the fear still there, or?
Well, it's sort of like each book I'm convinced is going to be a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll start working on it and I'll be like, this book is terrible. Everyone's going to hate it. So far everything's going okay, but it's inevitable I'm going to produce a stinker at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, some people would say I already have, but in terms of success, but I think that's a good thing because it sort of frees me up to say, well, it's going to bomb, so I can do what I want and not have to worry about, pleasing anybody. So,
Do you tend to write for yourself? I mean, is that what you're going for? Are you the one you're trying to entertain?
Yeah, I think when I first started off and I was doing mini comics, I think I was aiming for a certain audience, and that's why it was just seemed phony and was annoying to write. So I just said, well, I'm going to do a kind of story I would like to read, and hopefully other people will like to read it too. And again, thankfully that paid off. That's why I named the book Box Office Poison, because I thought for sure it was going to be
Okay.
terrible.
I had that question for you, actually.
Oh, okay. So
No.
well, that came from the movie Mommy Dearest. At one point, they say, "You're voted box office poison," and I thought that was so funny. They would vote someone box office like it's some kind of prize or something. So,
And
anyway.
there's not a wire hanger in the place. We checked.
No.
No.
I learned the hard way.
Yeah. It's scary. Let me ask you. When you started Box Office Poison, it's 1994 or around then?
Yeah, about 94.
So at that point, it's like the image boom,
Right.
And comics were going, and
Yeah.
you went completely the opposite way. I mean, was there anything else like that at the time, or?
Well, there was. There were alternative. There were books like Love and Rockets
Right.
and Optic Nerve and 8 Ball and things, and so I guess that's sort of more peep show books like that I
Right.
was going more for. By that point, I wasn't really reading many superhero comics, so the image thing was kind of like it was, certainly interesting because you heard all these.
Well, also just because the industry was like booming. People were making millions of dollars and everything. It was just before. I find it funny that your book actually took place. It was sort of like created during the whole crash of everything.
Yeah, actually, I think like a month and a half before my book was supposed to be published, Diamond was the only distributor left. Like my publisher called and said, "Well, Capital just got bought out by Diamond, so your orders are probably going to be cut in half." So I was like, "Great! I picked the perfect time to."
Well, if you weathered that storm.
Yeah, actually, other than that, my timing has been pretty good because now the whole graphic novels, are the hottest thing around. So getting reviewed everywhere, and it's a respectable thing. So
Now,
in that sense, I was lucky.
can you describe Box Office Poison for people who don't? I mean, we've talked about it on this show, but from
Right.
you, what would you say Box Office Poison is?
Box Office Poison is a gigantic book that follows the lives of a bunch of New Yorkers and their terrible jobs and relationships, both good and bad. And it's basically a bunch of people trying to figure out what adulthood
No,
is.
They're all like early mid-20s.
Yeah,
I
they're
guess.
all fresh out of college. I mean, there's one character who's like in his 70s, but other than that, most of the people are in their 20s and early 30s. It's a lot of fresh out of school type experiences. That what kind of career am I going to have? Am I going to find love, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Did you have I mean, it's sort of a sweeping epic of everyday life, I guess.
Yeah.
Did you know what it was? Did you have a plan for it? I mean, because you did it over a period of 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, 6 years. I started in '94 and finished in 2000.
I mean, did you know what it was going to be?
Yeah, I was a huge fan of Cerebus, and Dave Sim has those tremendously thick books, and that's the kind of thing I wanted to do. I wanted to do a big, long graphic novel, take time to do a lot of characterization, and then So I think very early on, I said, well, this is probably going to run about 20 issues or something like that, and it wound up being about 22 issues or something. So I was from the start, I was pretty close to figuring.
It was nice because you were able to take asides and you could have those pages of when you'd ask the characters a question and you could learn something about them and all that stuff. It seemed like you had a really good handle on those characters. Did they evolve a lot as you were going on?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because Sherman, the main character, the guy who worked in the bookstore, as the book went on, I liked him less and less. So by the end of the book, I really couldn't stand the character.
He was kind of a prick at the end.
Well, I don't know whether that was the way the character went or whether I got tired of him and so I was less forgiving of his sins and things like that. So,
So you got annoyed by a fictional character that you created.
yeah.
Not unlike a friend who you've sort of split up with over time.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's just sort of like, I guess as it's almost like I put my own worst traits into him. So at the beginning, we were in the same boat. We both had these terrible jobs that we hated. And then as, I sort of progressed in life, I was sort of frustrated that he was not progressing. So
He was still whining about the same thing and not doing anything about it.
And meanwhile, the character Ed, the other character who started off very much as a sort of minor supporting character, as the book went on, I identify with him more, so he sort of becomes more dominant as the book ends and has the last word in the book. So, which some people didn't like. Some people thought that was kind of a weakness, but.
Are you? Well, let me ask you. Are you? It's been a while now since you've done it. I mean, it really. You started it 14 years ago, so
Right, yeah, it's
and we're
crazy.
still talking about it. So that's
Right.
got to be a good thing. But do you ever look back through it? What do you think about it these days?
I mean, I haven't read it in a long time.
Have you
so-
ever gone back and read it after it was done?
I haven't read it tip to tail. I don't think I could do that. Like I said, I cannot look at the opening pages. It's just, plus I'm just so sick of them from seeing them for so long. But, I mean, it's definitely my most popular book. It's still the thing that I get the most comments on. And even like when Trick came out, my second book, but it sort of revived interest in Box Office Poison, and it actually sold better than the second book, even though the second one was new, because I guess it sort of sparked people on who would maybe heard of it. But so I'm grateful for that. I mean, if you have one book that's a hit or that people like, and that's more than most people have.
Well, I don't know. For me, there's something very very real about it, I guess. All of the characters seem to be like archetypes. They're people. I know people like this.
Right.
There's people in my life. And even in the other books, you seem to have a handle on this is this type of person. This is this
Right.
guy, and it's all those people I know. So I'm guessing that's why. I mean, are you doing that consciously, or are these characters? Are they based on people you know, or?
Some of them were inspired by people I know. Some of them were like sort of idealized versions of people. And some of them were based, I guess, on famous people I didn't know but imagined. Well,
Right,
semi-famous. The character Dorothy is inspired by the actual literary figure Dorothy Parker, who was a writer. She was very funny, but her just personal life was a disaster. And I think at the time I just read a biography of her, so I said, well, let me make her a character in the book. That could be interesting.
Get reliable, secure web hosting from GoDaddy.com, which includes 99.9 uptime, 24/7 support, and free access to Hosting Connection, the place to install over 30 free applications sure to help you get the most from your hosting plan and website. If you want to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has what you need. .com names as low as $1.99, plus world-class hosting and fast and easy website builders and much more. Then get a .tv domain name and stand out from the crowd. .tv domains are perfect for podcasters, video bloggers, anyone with something to say. And they're available now at GoDaddy.com. Tune in June 29th to July 5th to see GoDaddy girl Amanda Beard as she makes her bid for Beijing in the U.S. Swim Team Time Trials. And don't forget, coupon code iFanboy gets you 10% off all of your purchases at GoDaddy.com.
This is the typical size that you work in?
Yeah, these days this is the typical size I work in. I used to work, 10 by 15, but in my old age it keeps getting smaller and smaller. So this way also I can fit it on my scanner without having to reduce it or paste it together in Photoshop. I'm totally ignorant about computers, so.
That's fine. Now, how do you normally work out a page? Now, do you start with a thumbnail and then put them onto here in rough pencils, or?
I'll in my sketchbook I'll sort of write it out and do sort of key faces or poses or whatever. But then I'll just go to this page and pencil it all out. Put in the word balloons. This one, as you can see, is sort of halfway. I've penciled it. I've put in the word balloons. I just do very loose pencils, and then when it comes down to doing an individual panel, I'll do much tighter pencils and ink it.
And you
from there.
actually you letter it first?
Yeah, it's sort of like the way Marvel Comics, because that way you sort of don't have to worry about if you ink it first, then you have to worry about fitting the word balloons around what you've done, and sometimes
And you still hand letter everything.
Yeah. So
That's impressive, I gotta say. I don't
well,
know.
I don't know. I don't know how I've gotten some complaints about my lettering, but I just am really old school in that way that I like the flexibility of, like I said, I'm very ignorant about computers, and I don't really have any great desire to learn how to do computer lettering. But I'm sure if someone showed it to me, I'd be like, this is ridiculously simple. I've been a fool all these years, but what the heck.
After Box Office Poison, you went on to do Tricked. Was that like an idea you had kicking around in your head, or?
No, it was actually a tough place to get to that. Where I had a bunch of ideas. Some of them I started working on. Just didn't pan out. So I basically had a lot of ideas, and I said, well, why don't I use a bunch of them? So that's why the structure of it is sort of 6 characters, all with their own storylines. So it was kind of like combining a lot of different half-formed stories that I had. So.
Was there a lot of like pre-planning in that? Did you script that more heavily than you had Box Office Poison?
No, the difference was, I guess, is as might become apparent after reading the book, is that the structure is very much like I did the ending. I thought of the ending first and said, okay, I know I have to get all these characters to this particular position, and then I sort of work backwards from there. But I never write out a complete script or do anything other than a very loose outline, because I like to give myself room to play
really?
around.
So you didn't really know how long it was going to be or where?
I had an estimate in my head, sort of the way I did with Box Office Poison, but beyond that, I really like to keep it loose.
So you're just flying through life with no plan.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just,
My God. Was there ever any point? Because Tricked actually, I mean, it seems like
Right.
it doesn't read like that. It
Right.
seems like you knew where you were going and everything. And was there ever a point where you were like, oh no, I've got myself in a corner. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get from here to here, or did it?
Yeah, I mean, the weakness of working the way I do, which is sort of one page at a time, basically, is that you're very exposed to writer's block, because you'll have all the characters sitting around saying, okay, what do we do now? And I'm like, I have no idea. I know I have to get you from this side of the cliff to that side of the cliff, but I don't know how I'm going to get you there. So
You just do the time device. 1 year later, and
yeah,
it's
exactly.
all over. Oh, that was great.
Ooh,
How
that was
happened.
close.
Now, one thing that I'd noticed, because is that Tricked is a fictional world. All of your cultural references and everything in it are made up, whereas Box Office Poison has
Right.
all sorts of real stuff.
Right.
Did you decide to do that on purpose, or?
Yeah, it was actually sparked on by there was a Spanish translation of Box Office Poison, and I got an email from the translator who's like, "There's a couple of references that don't mean anything to us. Can I ask you what they are, so I can sort of come up with a parallel Spanish thing, or at least explain what it was?" I'm like, "Sure, send me the things," and it was probably like 700 questions, like, what does "kiss my grits" mean? Who are Abbott and Costello? Who is Anna Nicole Smith? All these kind of things, and I'm like, oh my, I didn't realize I was sort of like this, Quentin Tarantino-esque, shorthand. I'll just
That was the
make
flavor of the mid '90s, though.
Yeah,
We were all
yeah,
doing it.
it's probably true. So I
It's
was
Kevin Smith's fault. Or Quentin Tarantino, probably.
right. So I was determined not to have that happen with the second book. So I accidentally left Rolling Stone magazine in there. But other than that, every band, every song, every movie, everything that's mentioned
Every
in
sports
it is-
figure, I was like,
Yeah,
wow,
right.
nothing's real here. And they weren't even they were in some city. They weren't in New York City.
Yeah,
right?
it was not. I specifically didn't even want to make it New York City. It's sort of like, sometimes it seems like Los Angeles, sometimes it seems like New York. I have palm trees in it, which makes it, so. Also, I think the other thing is working with pop culture characters is risky, because you might, if you made a reference to O.J. Simpson in 1989, it means something very different, 10 years later. So, you can't watch Naked Gun now without thinking of O.J. Simpson killing his wife. So that's the risk you have when you put a pop culture thing in it. Not to mention, like, 20 years from now, people might be like, I don't even know who, that is. And
Ray Beam, is he based on anybody? I kept trying to fit him into somebody in my head, and I couldn't.
Well, it's sort of an amalgam of. I was originally inspired to do a story of a sort of John Lennon-ish figure.
By the way, Ray Beam is the
Yes.
character from Tricked, who's a rock star who was in a very popular band. Then they broke up. He had one solo album, and this book is
Right.
sort of about the time that he tries to come up with his second album.
See,
which,
but
by the
you
way,
did read it. You did read it.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I very much enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
Very much like you were. Wait a minute, you were working on your second book at the time. Wait a minute. No, but what I mean,
Right.
Were you thinking of anybody specifically?
Well, John Lennon was definitely an inspiration. One of the
Because everything after Plastic Ono Band sucked.
yeah, well, yeah, it was more about like the sort of mythology of John Lennon and Yoko Ono as having this perfect relationship, and then there was a book by this guy named Albert Goldman that came out in the late '80s, which is basically saying that's all a lie. John Lennon was a drug addict up until the day he died, and you know, and so I was interested in sort of exploring that idea, and but there's visually he's definitely inspired by Elvis Costello. In terms of the setup of the band, it was almost like the Police, where they only had a couple of albums that were really huge, and Sting managed to have a big solo career after that. A big solo career, I would say, good solo career necessarily. But so, and I also just read a lot of rock biographies of Bob Dylan and other, just to get a lot of Elvis and just to get stories and sort of flavor.
And Caprice was a character who was carried over. Was there a reason that you decided to stick with her?
Mostly just because I enjoyed writing and drawing her. She was originally supposed to be a sort of throwaway character in Box Office Poison, only going to be in one scene. But I had I don't know, something about her just struck me that I brought her back, and she played a very important role in the end of Box Office Poison. Spoiler. But is that a spoiler? Giving a vague hint about
I
something?
can't. I've been rereading it, but I haven't got to that point.
Okay.
I don't remember. So.
But yeah,
Sort of.
so and actually, it's kind of a nerdy thing of my own where. Ever since I was I've been doing comics since I was high school. Since I was high school, ever since I was in high school,
I am high school.
I would sort of take one character from my previous work and have them carry over, so you could sort of trace my family tree of characters back to things I did in high school. For example, the character Jane in Box Office Poison was originally a character in a story I was working on prior to that, and so
You're an indie comic continuity nerd.
Yeah, so, well, it's funny
Do you
because
give
someone
yourself
else...
no prizes, or...
Well, it's funny because someone just emailed me asking, they had just read Too Cool, and a character in Too Cool appears in Tricked, in Box Office Poison. The assistant principal in Too Cool is Sherman's manager later on in Box Office Poison.
Okay.
And someone said, is it supposed to be the same character? And I said, well, yeah, it is. And they said, well, in Tricked, in Box Office Poison, he mentions that he's been in retail for 30 years. So how could he be a school principal? And I'm like, oh boy, So I forget where I was going with this, but yeah, he was essentially looking for a no prize.
Caprice lives in a completely different world in Tricked anyway. They're not.
Yeah.
They don't have the same culture. It's fine.
Yeah, it's true. It's like sort of a parallel universe.
Yeah,
It's the same
fine.
actors playing different roles, is the way I see it.
That works too.
Yeah, so.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break and go to our sponsor, and then we'll be back.
Thanks to Netflix for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. With Netflix, you can rent over 90,000 titles online, including lots of Blu-ray titles, with free shipping both ways to your home. They now have over 40 shipping centers, so almost all deliveries happen in just one business day. The Netflix plans start as low as $4.99. As a new member, you can get a no-risk 2-week free trial membership. Just check out www.netflix.com/iFanboy, and remember to type in that www when using this code. iFanboy is partnered with eMusic to create a hand-picked playlist of some of our favorite songs. Visit www.emusic.com/iFanboy, download the songs, and let us know what you think. We'll be creating new eMusic playlists, and when we do, we'll tell you about them on our show. eMusic is offering 50 free songs to iFanboy viewers when they visit www.emusic.com/iFanboy and sign up for a free trial. eMusic delivers songs in the universally compatible MP3 format, which means your music plays on your iPod or Zune with no restrictions or DRM hassles. Visit www.emusic.com/iFanboy today.
What's your least favorite thing to draw? Like, what's the thing that just keeps coming up?
Backgrounds in general are something I'm not that interested in, but the worst thing is definitely cars. I'm incapable of drawing cars, and I think it might stem back to even pre-high school when, because all kids like to draw, and I never really had interest in cars, and like the cool kids would love to draw very detailed cars, and I don't know anything about cars. I don't know, they'll say, what kind of car did they have? Like, it was a blue car, and that's about the extent of my knowledge. So,
Now, when do you know you're finished with a page? Do you agonize over the end of it, or you're like, nope, that's done, I'm out?
No, once what I'll do is I'll get to the point where all the panels look like this, where it's just sort of almost like a coloring book where there's nothing filled in, and then I will take a brush and a bottle of ink and fill in all the parts that are going to be black, which I like to use a lot of black, so that winds up being a lot of paint. Like all this will be black, all this will be black, all in here. The cat will be black, so I think it just really makes the whiter things pop out a lot. This is an ordinary number 2 pencil, available at any.
You don't use like a fancy drawing pencil?
No, it's just regular number 2 pencil.
He saves hundreds of years like that. $100 a year.
Yeah, I don't use one of those whittling things. I just use the, good old-fashioned American electric pencil sharpener. So I will pencil, and then I use 2 types of tools to ink. I use these micron pens. Let me get you one that's a little less corroded, which I will use to do the lettering. And usually the faces, because I get a bit more control, and the faces are the most important thing in terms of the small details. An eyebrow out of place can really change the way a picture looks. And I also use these Japanese brush pens, which have a sort of, this end's more visually interesting. As you can see, it's sort of a brush at the end.
See, that's much more fancy than the number 2 pencil you've made up for.
Yeah. These certainly ain't cheap. And what's funny is people say, well, what kind do you use? And this is the kind I don't know what, I don't know what this is. So
it's line, squiggle, circle line.
If any Japanese readers want to let me know what that says, I would really appreciate it.
How do you know to order them?
Well, there's a Japanese store over in Rockefeller Center where they sell Japanese books and Japanese things and art supplies, and someone recommended it.
Is it like a calligraphy pen, like a Japanese?
Your guess is as good as mine.
How did you find it?
Someone recommended it to me and told me where to go and buy it.
Okay.
And now that's.
And you take yours in and compare the characters and go, I think this is a match?
Well, no. I mean, I know what the packaging looks like. Hey, look at this. More my inner secrets revealed. So this is the actual casing here of the pen. So I know what they look like. So that's about the extent of. And then I use this high polymer eraser. I use this to erase pencil marks.
More recently, you came out with, it was a mini comic, I guess, The Lower Regions?
Yeah, it was Alex Robinson's Lower Regions. Contractually obligated to call it Alex Robinson's Lower Regions.
And it's also a little double entendre, isn't it?
Yeah, not a little one. It's reasonable size, average. It's average entendre.
How would you describe this book? Because it was a departure.
Yeah, I was working on Too Cool, and I just had a really bad writer's block, and I said, let me just do a quick comic that would just be fun and just let my inner 13-year-old run rampant. So I basically did a story about a sexy lady with an axe fighting monsters for 60 pages, and I would draw the fight until I got sick of drawing that monster. Then she would kill it and move on to the next one. So and there's no talking in it. It's just all action. And
is this signal something you'll want to do differently in the future?
I don't know if it's something, when I was doing it, I was like, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And a friend of mine was like, they're like, well, it's kind of like eating chocolate cake. It tastes delicious, but you're really going to get sick of it, and want
I disagree with your friend entirely.
Well, that's what I thought. And then I started doing it, and it turned out to get actually kind of.
No, but did you just keep eating cake?
Oh, no. Yeah, I was weighing 140 before I started. So it might be something I'll revisit periodically when I want something to just have fun with, but it was the most fun I've had since I was 14 years old. So.
Very cool. Which brings us to the new book.
The new book.
The new
yes.
graphic novel.
Yes.
Too Cool to Be Forgotten. Mm-hmm. What's the pitch?
I really like that this one has such a simple thing compared to my other books. It's about a middle-aged man who wants to quit smoking, and so he gets himself hypnotized. And it sends him back to 1985, where he doesn't
use candy cigarettes to get him off.
No, he tried to, but that and chocolate cake are the 2 things he tries. But so basically, he has to relive high school as a 40-year-old person, and so hilarity ensues.
I see. Now, were you excising high school anxiety demons?
Yeah. I graduated from high school in 1987. I was going to say 97, wishfully thinking. I graduated from high school in 1987, so last year was my 20th reunion. Mm-hmm. And that sort of sparked me on. I was like, I'm going to come out with a comic book about high school, and it'll come out on my 20th anniversary, and I'll bring it to the reunion and show everyone and be like, in your face, I'm a famous guy now. But sadly, it did not come to pass because it was a lot harder to write than I thought. So yeah, high school always loomed large in my personal mythology, so I thought it was a good thing to examine.
And did you create it the same way? So did you go a page at a time, or did you have this more fully
yeah,
full
page at a
story?
time. Same way I did all of them. This is another one. Obviously, I had the ending in mind when I started it, but yeah, I was more or less improvising it.
Now, you said it was difficult. What was it that you?
Well, because basically I sort of had to live mentally in high school for 2 years as I was working on it.
And you're like me. Did you just block it out completely when you went back to it?
Well, almost the opposite. It was just sort of like I was obsessing over it, and but to be thinking about it that long, that intensely was very I would say agonizing process. But it was the worst torture I've ever endured. So
I'm glad we could make you talk about it.
Yeah. So well, I've not gonna make me cry.
Well, actually, speaking of that, there's a bit in the book.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give it away because the book's just come out. And I want people to be able to read it. But you got me.
Oh, really?
You got
Oh,
me.
good.
How does it feel to make a man cry?
Well, it's tough because I just read. I normally don't read reviews, but someone on Facebook posted a review, and I was like, and the word I saw was schmaltzy. So, it's a fine line between sentimental and sincere. I'm glad, other people said they liked it. And
I can see that, but
them.
anything is schmaltzy if you're not into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're not, but for some reason, I'm gonna dance around this because I don't want to say what it is.
I don't want to give it away, but
I didn't see what was coming, and now looking back, it was completely obvious.
Right.
It should have been, I guess, but I was just like,
Well,
yeah,
good.
we're going along through the thing,
Yeah.
and you dropped hints and things like that, and there's a page that you turn, and I was just like, oh. So when you do something like when you know you're working up to that, are you inking over it and crying, or are you just this is the worst thing I've ever done, or
no, well, because I'm glad it worked in your case where you were sort of caught off guard, and that's how I wanted it to be for the character too. So other than knowing what was going to happen at the end, I really did not think about it until it came time to write it, and the ending itself actually was very easy to write. I think maybe just because it was sort of cathartic after all that awful high school stuff.
Right.
So, to do those scenes. So, I'm glad. I'm glad. Most people seem to be taking positively to it. So,
are you happy with how it came out so far?
Yeah, I think Matt Kint, who did the cover, did a fantastic job of I think it's an amazing cover. I guess you can put that in.
I will.
Post, right?
Yeah.
Post.
You'll be looking at it right now.
Okay. So, Matt Kint, a brilliant cartoonist in his own right, did a great job with the cover, and I think it's a nice little package. And
so, going through it, did you think of anything that you would tell your 16-year-old self? Like if you could go back and have, because what happened is the character goes back and he starts to react to all these high school things, but with the mind of his 37, 40.
Yeah, 40 years old.
However old he is, and he's like, this doesn't make sense. It's all going to be, you're going to forget all this. Like,
right.
And that perspective is, of course, incredibly refreshing to talking to high school kids who make no sense at all.
Right.
I mean, what would you tell yourself?
I guess basically I would just tell myself to sort of hang on. And even though it sucks now, I wind up happy eventually. I mean, that's, people have asked me, well, what would you change if you went back to high school? And the true but not very fun answer is, well, nothing really, because if you're happy with your present life, you don't want to take a chance on screwing it up by saying, well, I'd go out and get laid when I was 15, and then, well, how was
the
that?
Marty McFly problem.
Yeah, exactly, the McFly dilemma. So, but I guess just sort of vague and probably useless advice like, hang on, stick it out, you'll get laid eventually, all those jocks are assholes, that kind of stuff. Which I'm sure if I told some high school nerd that now, they wouldn't believe me.
So did you like bone up on high school TV shows or DVDs and stuff like that? Did you watch The Breakfast Club a bunch? Or?
No, I was actually very determined not to write Hollywood teenagers, which is another reason why I think the book was very hard to write, because no offense to any teenagers out there, but you guys are crazy. Like,
Well, teenagers now.
yeah, no,
Oh.
well, even back then, I'm sure if you were an adult talking to a teenager in 1985,
Yeah.
I think it's just a universal. We thought we were cool or whatever, but it's just like most teenagers. If you wrote realistic teenagers, it just seems like very bad writing because they're erratic and they're very self-conscious, and so I sort of backed myself into a corner by saying I'm going to write realistic teenagers and not Beverly Hills 90210, and it really came back to bite me in the ass. So I really regret doing it. I don't really regret doing it, but it just definitely made it more difficult.
Let me ask you just, we've talked about sort of the breadth of your career. Like, what is there anything that you notice differently about the way that you draw now than you used to? I mean, like technically, I guess how has it changed for you?
Well, technically,
I can see that it looks differently, but I don't know the words for it. I
right.
guess.
Well, at one point I switched tools. I used to use sort of thin pens, but now I use these sort of Japanese brushes. I don't know, is that what you mean, or do you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
broader than
I mean,
that?
I guess the sort of your technique
Yeah.
in drawing. Are you drawing basically the same way you always did, or?
I work smaller now than I used to.
Really?
I used to work a lot. I used to draw 10 inches by 15 inches, and now I do about 9 by 12.
Okay.
Which is funny is when I look at the old pages, I'm like, oh, how on earth did I fill these huge pages up? And that's why I did it, because theoretically I work faster with smaller pages. So,
Okay.
but beyond that, it's pretty much the same process, and
Okay,
hopefully more confidence. But
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess. Do you work faster than you used to, or?
no, that's the regrettable thing. I think as you get older, you just naturally slow down, and
Unless
Plus
you
we-
find shortcuts.
yeah, or
Sweet,
hire a
sweet.
team of assistants.
Yeah.
But
I saw them in the other room.
Yeah, you hear the whips cracking in the background. No, I think it's just also when you're young and you're much more enthusiastic. People said one of the crazy things about Box Office Poison is I seem to use every trick, every cartooning trick. Pages with text and a lot of crazy layouts. And I think it was sort of a matter of, well, I have a comic book now. This might be the only shot I get at this, so I'm going to throw in every tool, use every trick, and
Do you think that you're less? I don't want to less gimmicky. I guess. I mean,
Well-
I mean, there are a lot of tricks in Box Office Poison and in
Right.
Tricked. I mean, if
Yeah.
I can't remember the character's name off the top of my head, but the guy who goes nuts.
Steve, yeah,
Steve,
yeah.
his dialogue gets more and more and that's visually represented, and also
Right.
I mean.
Well, I think I do it more in service of the story now. I think that's the difference. Whereas in Box Office Poison, I might have used something just for the sake of, well, let me just do a fun layout just
Right.
because it's fun. Now I tend to do it, I hope, more in terms of like, well, in terms of serving characters in the
You're
story.
more refined.
I guess, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Go with it.
Yeah, I am refined.
Yes, that's why we
Yeah.
have beards, so we can stroke them
Yes,
and
exactly.
agree to things like that.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think that I've wasted tons of your time, but thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you about this.
No,
stuff.
well, it was my pleasure. And
And-
you did waste tons of my time, but,
Yeah.
it's-
That's why the next book will be late.
Exactly. Blame these guys.
Thank you very much.
So-
All right, so if you have any questions, you can write to contact@iFanboy. You go over to iFanboy.com and see everything there and make comments on this show. And get over to revision3.com/iFanboy to see more videos and things like that. Thank you very much. Thank you, and you.
So long.
He's so friendly. Now, I know you don't have any whiteout or anything, so
Well, I
when
do.
you mess up with ink,
Yeah, here's the whiteout. I
oh,
use.
see, here I was trying to say you were perfect, but
It's liquid pipel. It's a French correction fluid, correction combo. But the bad part about this is that it doesn't age very well. So some of my older pages with the whiteout, the stuff really gets like yellow. So, but I've never been able to find a good ageless whiteout. So, again, any any listeners out there,
viewers.
any viewers, you're filming this?